Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I am really thrilled to welcome Ashley Cox to the show. She is a leadership mentor who gets results. With over 18 years of experience guiding leaders at all levels, from startups to industry powerhouses like J.Crew and Kroger, Ashley enables ambitious women and business owners to build high-performing teams that they can trust and rely on. Known for her energetic and actionable approach, Ashley helps clients develop the skills they need to be effective leaders without sacrificing their humanity. A sought-after speaker, Ashley is also the author of Transform Your Stories and the host of the Impact Ripple podcast. Ashley, welcome to the show. I am so glad that you are here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It is an honor to be on Transforming 45, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. So let's get into it. All right, Ashley, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
I feel like that's such a big question. Like, who are you? And, you can say the typical things like, oh, I'm a wife and I have 2 dogs, which are my version of children. And I live in Tennessee and I come from West Virginia and all of these things. But I think it's so much bigger than that, right? Like, I think who I am is someone who tries to enjoy the little things in life, notice the birds in the sky or the flowers that are blooming in the field and really pauses to stop and just appreciate in the midst of whatever is happening that day, the beauty that surrounds us. And I really think that's just who I am at my essence. I recognize the beauty in the world, the beauty in each other. I love being able to just call something out in someone else that I see, whether it's something about their personality or their way they're showing up in the world or the work that they're doing. And outside of, the things that we can physically see. So just someone that really just notices and appreciates the beauty in everyone and everything around me.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think, you nailed that difference between role and essence.
Yeah.
Right. We talk about this a lot on the show, and people will often introduce themselves with their role because it's what we've been taught to do, right? Yeah. Is to lead with what we lead with what we do rather than what we are.
Yeah.
And that's it's the result of a lot of reflection to be able to work your way through what is role versus what is the truth of who I am. And through your story, how do you think you were able to come to that, to be able to do that separation of moving away from the doing to the being?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. I think in any situation it would be. One, lots of therapy over the years, lots of therapy, which creates a space and a container for you to be able to separate those things and to learn how to be and how you want to be in this world and even the aspirational version of what you want to be. So definitely lots of therapy, lots of witnessing the women around me being recognized only for the role that they play in association to someone else. I am so-and-so's wife without leading with their name or who they are, like I'm Mark's wife or I'm, John's wife or I'm whoever. And so seeing women who are kind of taking a back seat to those around them, or I'm, Sarah's mom or I'm Mike's mom or whoever. I don't necessarily want to show up in this world as belonging to someone else. I want to belong to me first. And of course, that came through a lot of observation and a lot of therapy and a lot of conversations with other women about how do we want to show up in this world and how do we model that for other women.
Yeah, I have a tingling in my hands and my feet. That's always a really good sign of like, yes, let's get into this.
Yeah.
And that is, I think I have talked about this on the show before, where for years when my kids were little and we'd be going to whatever the event or thing was, I'd be having a conversation with another human. And the way we would introduce ourselves is I am Will's mom, I am Nate's mom, or or that person would respond and I really reflected on that because it didn't feel truthful to me.
Mm,
Like, yes, yeah, I am. I am their mom. I love them. I love this role that I have. And before them, I was a human
yeah.
and I continue to be a human. And
Mhm.
so I tried to be intentional about not introducing myself that way, about saying, "Hi, I'm Lisa,"
Wow.
and saying my
Mhm.
and it was interesting. So many people would still respond with, "And I'm Sarah's mom,"
Mhm.
or whoever it was.
Mhm.
And there is so much value in taking the time to remember that yes, we do not exist just in relation to other people or other roles or the in relation to the work that you do, in the teams that we are on, in the leaders that we are, because and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. The leaders that we are reflective of how connected we are to ourselves and our humanity.
100%. And our teams are also a reflection of who we show up as leaders. And so if we show up without identity, without owning our power or our authority or our position or our humanity, then our teams are going to show up in that way. And I think a lot of times people make it so much harder than it needs to be. Like, why isn't my team doing this or doing this or doing this? Well, let's take a look at what you're doing or not doing and see how that's being reflected in your team. And so if your team's not taking ownership, where are you not taking ownership as a leader, as a human, as a woman, as fill in the blank? And so a lot of times we can see that association. And so we're like, okay, it's not that your team doesn't want to take ownership. It's that we're not allowing or creating the space and modeling the behavior that we want.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I For the end of my career, well, the last decade of my career, not the end of it, the last decade, I was working as a central educator and providing professional development for other educators. And in the last 3 years of that, I was leading a team. And this is exactly what we did. We made time and space for our humanity.
Mm,
It also happened to be during COVID.
mm,
So this one particular team I was leading started in 2021, September of 2020, actually. And that was a really hard time for everyone and for educators who were going back into buildings with young humans. There was a lot of emotional labor that was happening that was going very unsupported. Like, not only for the educators themselves who are going into these spaces with PPE, like all the masks, the shields, you name it. You were under
Gloves,
layers of, yeah,
sanitizer, and all the things. Yeah.
all the things, layers, and then trying to make young humans feel like they were
Mhm.
safe in this space. I get emotional thinking about it because there's lots of unresolved trauma around that. And so I intentionally was making room for my team to
Mhm.
be able to process that and come together and connect and have community. So
Mhm.
I was carving time out of the week to do that. And other teams around found that very challenging, that we were actually taking time to do this. And it wasn't necessarily it was not well supported that I was doing this for this team. And so my question for you is, when you are working with a team, maybe within an organization, how do you start building that value for the humanity of the people who are doing the work?
Mhm.
Because I think this is a key theme no matter where you work right now. This is something that is coming to the surface and is really important, and yet is still not really being given the support that it needs.
Yeah. I think this is such an important conversation to have because study after study after study has proven that when we take care of someone as a whole person, they are happier, which means they're more productive, they're more creative, they're more innovative. Aren't these all things we want and need in our businesses? And so when we have those things, that's where we start to see that direct return on investment. And so we see productivity increase. We see sick days decrease significantly. We see turnover decrease significantly, which can be incredibly costly for a business. And so it doesn't always necessarily look like, well, I did this and I got an immediate return on investment. It's a little bit of a winding path to get there, but you cannot fight the data. You cannot fight the studies that show when we commit to this way of being as leaders, these are the positive results and outcomes. And when we have that high performing team, they're outperforming other teams by double digit percentages. That's if you just want to look at the bottom line, like that's the business case for why we should just treat people with dignity and respect and as humans. If you got to have the numbers, if you got to have the data. And I think that the hard part is that we live in such a capitalistic world that it's always about drive, 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 go, 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 make more, make more, make more, that it can tend to fill up your to-do list with a lot of tasks that are important, but they may not be essential. They may not be critical tasks. And so we have to look through that, and we have to look through the weeds to figure out what are the essential tasks that are going to have that long-term positive impact. And it will always be taking care of your people. Always. Because when you take care of your people take care of business. And I think, we've probably all heard that saying at some point, especially when it comes to like retail businesses, right? If you take care of your people will take care of your customers. And that's the same thing within the context of service-based businesses or businesses where, somebody's working on projects or tasks behind the scenes and they don't have that direct correlation with customers. Because when they know you care, they care more about their job. And we all want to show up to work and do meaningful work. We want to do work that feels centered and aligned and important and that it matters. Most people don't just show up to work and think like, well, none of this matters. My whole life doesn't matter. Everything's, a disaster. Like we can make them feel that way. And that's where we get marginal effort. That's where we get people that are kind of just flying under the radar and they're not really enthusiastic. And a lot of times people will say, well, how do I get my team to care more? And I'm like, care more about them.
And that is a great lead into what I was going to ask next, because, you talked about evidence and data and this very simple idea of if you care about people, they will care about what they do.
Mhm.
And yet we
Yeah.
still stay very stuck
Mhm.
in a very patriarchal colonial model
Mhm.
of what is even the metric, like of what we think success is or what we think productivity is. I think that's it. I think that's where it, right?
Yeah.
What we think productivity is and what
Mhm.
we think productivity leads to. So I'm wondering how you see that playing out. And then how do you help to shift those mindsets?
I mean, I see it every day because I primarily work with women-owned businesses that have women teams. And the reason so many women have made a mass exodus from corporate jobs is because corporate jobs aren't structured for women who are in child rearing years, women who are in menopausal years, women who are looking for that second career or they're looking for that career extension and longevity. And so women are like, forget it. I'll go create my own thing. The problem then becomes that this is the only example they've had of how to run a business. And so a lot of times I see them perpetuating the same things they were running away from. And my job is to say, what if it could be different? What if it didn't have to be this way? And sometimes people just need someone on the outside to kind of mirror what they're experiencing and what they're creating in their business to say, hey, what if we tried this instead? Have you considered that? What would feel really good in this situation that doesn't feel good right now? Where do things feel sticky, or where does it feel like you've lost your humanity? Because that's a big part of it is a lot of times, they're working with teams. They've got 5 or 10 or 20 people, and they're like, I feel like I'm losing my soul. Literally had someone say this to me 2 weeks ago. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
losing my soul. Wow. Let's go find that soul and get it back in there because it doesn't have to be that way. And the big and important part is just grounding into your values. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? And how do you want to support the people that are on your team? What matters to you? What are non-negotiables? And what are things that you would like to aspire to? We may not be able to implement every single thing today. Sometimes that's unrealistic. Sometimes budgets don't allow, and we don't want to cannibalize our businesses, right? We don't want to put a bunch of programs and things in place that we can't support or sustain, and then the business goes under. But how do we create that vision and that path for this is where we are now and what we're able to offer, and this is where we're going? Join us on this journey. And it's about inviting people in. It's not about having all the best ideas or the only ideas or trying to guess what people might want. It's sitting down at a table and being really intentional and saying, hey, what would make this feel like a really supportive environment, different than anything you've ever experienced before? Let's throw out what we knew and let's just brainstorm all the ideas. Doesn't mean we can implement them all. but we can dream, and we can dream together. We don't have to be in a silo by ourselves.
Yeah, I think that dream space is really important. And again, something that is that is not valued
Mhm.
really when we're in those institutional corporate spaces. And when you said, I feel like I'm losing my soul, it just brought back to me that line actually was what precipitated my exit from
Mm.
education. Oh God, I had been working on report cards and I was teaching grade 6 online. And so I had a bunch of humans who I'd never even seen their faces in many
Mhm.
cases. How do you evaluate someone like a human when we are in these conditions? And so I wrote a tweet that I had backed up with research also about how devastating assessment evaluation was for humans at this stage. And I said, I feel like my soul is being sucked out of my body every time I have to associate a number or a letter to a young human at this point in time. And I had a little gif of Dementors from Harry Potter.
I love it.
And
A
I
little
was
humor, a little data, a little plea for help.
right. That's what I thought too. I was like, I am advocating for the young humans in my
Yeah.
world.
Yes.
And I was reported for that tweet. I had to go through a full investigation.
Oh,
And for me, that was the moment of this place is not for me.
yeah.
And what I really wanted during that process was exactly what you were describing, was someone to sit down with me, someone who was a decision maker and had some power and say, hey, we noticed this. We also noticed that it was getting a lot of reaction, right?
Mhm.
Like it was getting a lot of support. Let's talk about what your experience is. Let's talk about what the young humans in your world are experiencing. And let's think about a more humane way of doing this
Mm.
in this time that will also be able to feed forward.
Yeah.
Right. That would have been the productive way to move through that, come out with something better on the other side.
Yeah.
But because we, as a North American culture, don't particularly value sitting down, getting to the root of whatever the issue actually is, spending time on what are all of the factors that have created this root, and then how do we start to pull it out so that we can plant something new. So, how do you support organizations to make space for that dream,
Mm.
vision, imagination time
Yeah.
and generate value around it? And
Yeah.
by value, I mean like that people value it, not a monetary
Yeah,
value.
yeah. And if we get a monetary value out of it, that's what, that's what we would love to have too, because more
Yeah,
money equals more power, means more control, means more decisions that we get to make and be part of. And
yeah,
women need more money to have more power and to have a bigger voice. And so yeah, it's a balancing act always in how do we take care of people and also be profitable and keep those things. And I don't think that there is an either or. It gets to be a both and. We get to have
yeah,
people and profits. We don't have to sacrifice one or the other. And I think, first of all, it's a mindset shift, right? That, I can either take care of my people or I can make a bunch of money, but I can't do both. And that's not true. And I've got lots of clients who have proven that that is possible, that those two things together can be possible. And so, it all starts with your intention. You have to set the intention. Who do I want to be? What kind of business do I want to run? How do I want to take care of my people? And then you have to intentionally carve out the time and the space to do it. But I think even before we do that, there's ego that's involved. And we have to really do some self reflection and think about, where am I making decisions and not involving my team where I could? Where am I shouldering a lot of the burden and not sharing that with my team where I should? Because we didn't hire people to just run around like a little taskmaster and divvy out tasks all day long. We invited them into this business, into this company, to share in the burden of ideas and brainstorming and how do we do better? How do we streamline? How do we be more efficient so we can spend our time on the creative things? And so when we're so have things in such a chokehold that we don't allow our team to help us create efficiencies and streamlining, we don't get to do the fun stuff. We're stuck every day in the weeds, putting out fires and running around like a chicken with our head cut off. I mean, I'll add all of the analogies my clients come to me and say, all of them right there. And I'm like, there's a better way to run business, and it's going to take the whole team. And so, sometimes we have to get out of our own way. We have to get out of our own ego space and we have to hear the hard things. And getting feedback from your team is really challenging if you've never done it before. It can be really hard, especially the women that I work with are just such compassionate, empathetic, like loving people kind of folks. And so it's hard sometimes to hear the things that they're not doing well, that they could be doing better, that they're micromanaging or they've got too much of a chokehold on things. And so we have to let our ego get out of the way so that we can hear what we need to hear so that we can get out of the way and let our team help us.
Yeah. Oh, there's so there's so many threads in what you said there that I think need a lot of examination. It starts with what we are. It kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation a little bit, and that like role versus being, and what we have been told is most important, and that is that we are good at everything immediately, that we see everything from every possible perspective. And so we don't need anybody else to tell us because we are looking from everyone's perspectives, which is impossible.
Not happening.
Not happening. And that to be seen as successful and competent, we have to be able to do everything all the time by ourselves. And so when that is the programmed narrative, now you hire a team and it feels like failure when you start releasing responsibility to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's a hard feeling in your heart. It's a hard feeling in your soul and in your being. And I think that's what so many women struggle with, because especially those women who've started a business and they've ran it for years by themselves, and then they start bringing team on, they've had to learn how to do everything. They've had to be the expert. They've had to create the policies and the processes and the systems and right? And so then letting it go is like, but that's not the way we do it here. It's like, well, it could be better. It's okay. Like we can hire the people to be the experts that we can't be in every single field. And it absolutely blows people's mind when they come to me and they say, well, I have to learn this first before I can hire for it. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
That's not your role. I'm like, listen, the less I need to know about how things work, the better off I am, because I get to stay in my zone of genius, in my expertise, in my brilliance that allows me to provide the best service possible for clients. I don't need to learn how to edit a video. Why in the world would I need to learn how to edit a video? That is not my role. And so it's coming back to that role versus being. And I don't want to be the expert in video editing. The world does not need me to be the expert in video editing. Can I do it? I mean, it took me 4 hours to do something that my assistant was able to do in like 10 minutes one day. And I was like, wait a second, I'm being my own worst client right now. So, we all have lessons to learn that we continuously have to be mindful of learning, so that we say, oh, you know what? Actually, that wasn't a good use of my time today. 4 hours trying to edit a video clip. Probably not where I should have been spending my time. Why wasn't I asking for help? What was I afraid of? Who was I afraid of being? And so sometimes we have to stop and pause and ask ourselves really tough questions and then hand the task off and get it done in 10 minutes and move on with your life.
Right. And if we feel like we have to know how to do everything, then that means we feel like we have to manage everybody who's doing those things.
Yes.
Where it actually can be very liberating to say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know anything about that. That is entirely you.
Yes.
Go, right?
Go be the expert.
Yes, be free, run, be free, do it. And if I don't like it, then I can give you some feedback on it, but I don't have to be the person who holds that entire, like I don't have to hold all of the knowledge about absolutely everything all the time.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in a very patriarchal society, women are taught from a very young age that we are the caretakers and we're responsible for all the things and we have to know all and do all. If you think about the context of most family structures, who holds all the knowledge? Who knows all the doctor's appointments? Who knows all the birthdays? Who knows all the kids' friends' names? Who knows all the things about everything within the context of the family unit? If you're in a husband-wife situation, it's usually the wife. Now we're getting farther down the road of progress where I'm seeing like my sister's husband is an incredible dad and he's super involved and carrying that mental load as well as the physical load. And I think that we're moving in the right direction, and we're not there yet. And there's a long way to go. And so we have to start allowing ourselves to not be the 100% responsible for everything all the time person inside of our work lives and hopefully, inside of our families and start to kind of turn that tide a little.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the places where menopause and perimenopause can be a gift.
Mm,
Because at this stage, our bodies are changing so much that we don't have the capacity to manage all of the things. We also know that women are exiting traditional. My own brain fog is kicking in right here. This is what happens. My own word recall.
workplace.
Yes, traditional workplaces. Thank you. And I was just listening to a story this morning about how they can't keep teachers. And who are the majority
Mm,
of teachers? Women between the ages of 35 and 55.
yeah,
There is a staffing crisis happening.
yeah.
And I know that that is not exclusive to
Hmm.
education. And women who are exiting those workplaces have all of this incredible skill that you were just mentioning.
Hmm.
So, how do we help make the connection for organizations so that they understand just what they are going to lose? And
And
perhaps they're already noticing it. Like, my hope is that they are noticing it in the data and what's happening in their workplace cultures and environments. But how do we start making that connection for people? I'm talking about it in the menopause context, but we could be talking about it in the, early childbearing years, in the early childhood years, in the caring for elderly parent. Like there's all of the things, and multiple people fit into this as well.
Mhm.
Menopause just happens to be my wheelhouse. How do we start making the connection
Yeah.
that we need to shift these workplaces so that we can continue to support and reap the rewards of the people who have all of this knowledge and skill?
Yeah. I mean, just the loss of knowledge and skill alone should terrify companies, truly. And whether you are just in the early stages of your career and you're in your 20s or early 30s, or you're toward the sunset age of your career, the knowledge that each individual brings is so critical because you've got the historical knowledge of the sunset years, where you've got decades of experience that is incredibly invaluable and that companies consistently want when they post jobs. Like, oh, we want you to, start at this entry level job, but have 20 years of experience. It's a running joke, right? In like HR world. Cause we're like, how do you get 20 years of experience when you want to pay somebody $30,000? Like that does not equate. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got your younger generation coming into the workforce. The Gen Zs are now really a prevalent part of our workforce, and they've got the technology skills. They've got the social influence skills. They've got the marketing skills that we've never had, as a group, as a collection of people. So how can you, I always come back to like, how could you throw that knowledge out the door? How could you throw that expertise out the door? And it's because people want to be in control, and we have got to learn to let go and let people help us. And I don't know, I think a lot of that comes from kind of the North American society and cultures and the ways that, well, if you're the boss, you're in charge, and I'm the boss, what I say goes sort of mentality, right? Like it's
Right.
my way or the highway around here. And maybe that works in certain situations. Like the things that I think of that is really important. And if you're in a surgical room, I want the surgeon to be in charge, and I want them to be calling the shots. If you're on the battlefield, you need to be able to take direction and take action without like saying, well, let's have a roundtable discussion about this, right? Like
Yeah.
there's certain situations where that type of leadership makes sense. In most organizations and most companies, it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to get a diverse group of people's inputs, ideas, perspectives, because just like you said earlier, I saw a cartoon this past week that had a woman standing on one side and a man standing on the other side of a number that was drawn on the ground. From her perspective, it looked like a 6. From his perspective, it looked like a 9. And there she was like, it's 6 and it's 9 and it's 6 and it's 9. And so we see things from different viewpoints. We have different religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds, and all the things that make us who we are come into play. And so when we don't have that diversity of perspective, we might miss a huge market that we could be selling our products to or creating products for. We might miss an opportunity to target through marketing efforts or avenues. We might miss a key component of streamlining or creating an efficiency that would save 50% of our time so that we're not working on humdrum, tedious, mundane, tasks that we're doing over and over and over, or we're touching the same thing 3 or 5 times, but we're moving on to more creative endeavors where we can really put the power of our human brain into work, because it's kind of like the saying, I want AI to do my laundry and wash my dishes so that I can create art and make music and do the things that humans were uniquely and specifically built to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we start moving into this time of AI, what are some of the ripples that you are starting to see or potential? When you were talking about all of the reasons why it's so important to have varied perspectives, right? Gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, age diversity, socioeconomic diversity, all of those things are so important. We know this. It is proven itself out over and over and over again. Yet we are in this time where all of our systems are in this like backlash of trying to push that out and protecting the colonial white patriarchal narrative that has like been this foundation for generations. And at the root of it is fear. Right? It always comes back to fear. If I change the way I've been doing something, does that mean that I was wrong all along? If I change my perspective, does that mean that I was not smart enough to see it in the first place? Right. At the end, it all comes back to these like deeply rooted limiting beliefs that we hold in ourselves. Is there an opportunity for AI to help us move through some of that hard stuff? To say, like, if AI were to come up with hey, this is a structure that works better, it takes it out of the like, oh, another human thought of that. And so I am less than because I didn't think of it. This is coming from a collective, from the hive, right? It's coming from the collective. Is it possible? Are you seeing this that people like listen to those a little bit more easily and are more willing to make change when it's coming from that perspective? And that is there some potential in that in helping us come together and move forward?
Such a great question. And yes, it's interesting that people will listen to technology more readily than they will listen to another human being who has their best interest at mind sometimes. And that can be a really slippery slope though, too, because AI is not perfect. AI is wrong a lot of the time. I'm always cautioning people, do not use AI as your legal representative. Please, by all means.
Or your therapist.
Or your therapist or your HR professional, because AI gets a lot of stuff wrong. I was looking up something the other day. It was for Women's History Month. And I was like, well, who are the most famous women in history in my home state of West Virginia? And it was like this person, this person, this person. And one of the women, it said, was the first African-American woman to hold this seat in Congress or whatever. And I was like, that's not right. That's not right. I know who this woman is. She is a white woman. And I was like, let me go to the Google and just verify. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong person. Okay, I go to the Google, I verify, and I'm like, nope. So I came back to AI and I was like, AI, you were totally wrong. This person was not the first African-American. They're a very white woman.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Sometimes I have the wrong information. And I'm like, okay, we need to be super mindful because that was a very benign situation. And so we have to be very careful what we're getting out of AI, what we're trusting. So while I would say, yes, let's use AI to help us with strategy and with structure and with putting together systems and processes, we still have to be mindful that a lot of the information that AI is mining from is white patriarchal information, because that's who owned the internet and that's who put information on the internet. And so we have to be, I have an episode on my podcast about BIPOC centered AI. And it's a really, really great episode because we're talking about those things and about making sure that where that data is mined from is representative of a diverse population. Otherwise, you're just going to get the same input that you've been getting for years. And so while you may listen to AI versus humans, really, there is nothing comparable to sitting down with a group of diverse people to have a really open, honest conversation. And that, again, is going to have to require us to set our ego aside and say, I may not know everything. I may have to admit that I've been wrong. I may have to change the way I've been doing things. And that's a hard road to travel and a long road for some people versus others. Some of us are a little bit more open and willing, probably those of us who've been in a lot of therapy, done a lot of self-reflection, realized we're kind of part of the problem. But I think that, start with AI, but allow that to open your mind
Yeah.
to sitting down with real humans and having those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is uniquely human,
Mhm,
right? The capacity to reflect and to evolve and to think differently.
mhm,
And I think one of the things I appreciate about AI is that it gives me a little structure and space in
mhm.
which I actually can imagine more.
Yeah.
And that's where I see the potential in this, right? Like I
Mhm,
can take all of everything that's in my head
mhm.
and dump it into a chat and say, okay, please structure this in a way that's super clear and understandable. So it takes all of the mental load of doing the niggly things
Yeah.
that is not my favorite thing in the
Yeah.
world. And it allows me to just purely like think and imagine and get that all out of my head.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see some of that potential where it can give us that container,
Mhm,
like it can give us a structure perhaps that takes some of the ownership out of it
mhm,
for the humans so
mhm.
that we can just imagine and connect and think and challenge and have like real discourse
Yeah.
in a way that feel so that no one feels like they have the ownership of it, because I find that that's sometimes where it breaks down. When someone feels like this was my thing,
Yeah.
this was my baby, and I feel like you are attacking this thing that I created, and in turn you are attacking me.
Yeah.
And that's where that communication can break down.
For sure. For sure. No, I think that AI is not going anywhere. So we've got to learn to integrate it and use it and be strategic with it. But AI is only as good as the questions you ask it. And the information that you feed into it. And so talk about this a lot with my clients is like, if you're having a hard time getting out of your team what you need from them, go have the same conversation with AI and you will find your gaps really quick because AI will do only exactly what you ask for. And the more clear you are, the better your response will be. But if you're super vague or you don't ask it the right question or you don't format it in a way that it gives you the output that you're wanting, you're going to start to see those communication gaps. And so I also love AI as a tool to be able to identify where am I not being clear? Where am I not being concise enough? I asked for this, my team did this, where's the gap? And it's a really powerful tool. But yes, it takes away the mundane tasks that can be produced and generated in seconds, literally seconds. You'll watch it go, and then it's like, wow, there's a whole structure, it's a whole plan. I'm good to go. But it's also, it requires the human brilliance and brain to put in the information and to ask questions and say, are there any other options that we haven't considered? Are there other structures that I've not been using that would be helpful in this situation? Is there a way we can streamline this? My forever statement is, how do we make this more concise? How do we make this more concise? I'm always telling AI, I'm like, how do we make
Yeah.
this more? This is too much. It's too much. It needs to be digestible for me, for the other people on my team, for whoever I'm working with. And so we still have to have our human input to get the output from AI. Same thing with your team. You've got to have the human input to get the output from your team that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. What is, if you had, just to wrap up our conversation, what is the one thing you would say to a woman who is thinking about stepping out and starting her own business, her own world?
Mm,
If you could give that person one piece of advice or like two or three things to
mhm.
really start as their foundation as they're going forward, what would that be?
Always start with your values. Every single thing you do. If you start with your values, there's the saying, start as you mean to go. Start with your values, and that will guide you in literally every decision that you make. And you are still going to make mistakes. You're still going to fall flat on your face. You're still going to have hard days and hard months and hard years. And all of that is just part of the journey. But if you start with your values and you can ground into those and you can center every decision you make in your business around those values, you will create a business that feels wholesome and fulfilling and heart centered and vibrant, even on the hard days. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice. Another piece of advice would be do something every single day to move your business forward. That was a commitment I made it myself. I've had my business for 9 years now. It was the commitment I made that I truly think has made all the difference in the world. I don't always feel like doing one thing every day to move my business forward. And I'm not talking like your days off. If you're off on the weekends, like be off. But if you work Monday through Friday, or I work Monday through Thursday, because I always wanted to have Fridays off, build your business the way that you want to work. I don't want to work on Fridays. I want to have a 3-day weekend. I remember sitting in my windowless office in my corporate job, pining away just to see the sunshine.
Yeah.
So, okay, those would be my 3 things then. Start with your values, do one thing every day to move your business forward, and create your business the way that you want to work, not the way that somebody else told you how work had to look.
That is really powerful and really meaningful pieces of wisdom. So thank you for sharing those. And one new question I started asking at the end of my show, because we are living in turbulent times, is what is bringing you joy right now?
What is bringing me joy? I have to say, we just wrapped up the spring season of my community chorus that I'm a part of, the Appalachian Equality Chorus. And it is the most joyful space I've ever been a part of. This is my second season with them. And we get to practice every Sunday evening together. And we actually have, there's about 100 members. So in our location in the city where I am, we've got about 25, 30 members. And then the other location was the original one. And they've got the majority, like 70 people there. But we all practice. They practice on Mondays. We practice on Sundays. And then we come together for concerts as a full choir. And the love and the acceptance and the joy and the fun and the camaraderie is completely unmatched. And I just use that group as an example of what is possible. And it gives me a lot of hope.
That is really beautiful. And again, comes back to like, it is uniquely human, is that ability to come together, the impact that the vibration of music has on all of us, and makes space for everyone to be there and valued and heard. So thank you, sir, for sharing that with us today. And thank you for being here. I so appreciate everything that you've shared today.
Thank you so much again for having me, Lisa. It's been such an incredible conversation. I really hope people find joy and inspiration and actionable things they can take away and say, I can do that. I can do that today, because it's not hard. It's simple, but it can be challenging sometimes to implement. So stay encouraged and stay on the path, and know that we can build profitable, people-centered businesses.
Absolutely. And where can people find you?
You can find me at ashleycox.co everywhere you go.
The best.
It's my little thing.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Transforming 45. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to embrace every facet of your midlife journey. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. These actions make a world of difference in growing our podcast community. Your support helps us reach much more amazing listeners just like you. And don't forget, please share an episode you love with a friend or with your community. Sharing our stories is what helps our community grow. Keep shining your midlife magic, and I'll catch you next week.
Electricast.